Hi, it's Ronald the Rules Lawyer, and I did a video recently on Pathfinder's stealth rules in 8 minutes, and a topic I did not cover was how to run ambushes in the system. How do we transition from sneaking up on some monsters and then launching an attack? An important use case that I did not cover, and if I had covered it, it definitely would not have fit 8 minutes. Because in Pathfinder, we do not have surprise rounds like we did in previous editions of D&D and Pathfinder. The GM core book goes over what to do in this situation, and it's useful in a few cases I find. However, I generally don't use it. I'm going to explain why after explaining what the GM core example is, and talk about why I don't use it and then what I do. First, let me introduce myself. I am Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I am a lawyer who runs tabletop role-playing games. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. I ran an after-school middle school class for several years. Support my Patreon. I do not make 6 figures as an attorney. In fact, I make 0 figures. A recent comment pissed me off. It allows me to continue making this channel, and I'm making this video on a specific request from the comments. Because YouTube ad revenue doesn't really pay, this is basically a public service. I need that Patreon to go above $1,500 a month in order to support basic living expenses. Supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. First, for people who are relatively new to Pathfinder, I want to explain why bother setting up an ambush if you do not get a surprise round. First, you get to start combat when your foes are not ready. A GM can freely give a circumstance penalty to the enemies on their initiative rolls. For example, if you ambush some guards who are not guarding and are in the middle of an argument over a card game, you can give them a -4 circumstance penalty to their initiative rolls. Also, foes might need to take actions after initiative is rolled to be ready to fight. They might not have a weapon in hand. They might need to spend an action, or they might be sitting down enjoying a meal and have to stand up. Also, if you're hiding behind cover when combat starts, you get to add that circumstance bonus from cover to your initiative roll. And lastly, if you start off hidden or undetected to the enemies, they have trouble perceiving you, which gives you distinct advantages. Now, I'm going to start with how GM Core explains how you should run an ambush, and I don't quite like their example and how they propose to do things. Now, this is a book that I quite like. I think it's maybe the best GM advice book out there for a crunchy system like this. It gives you a working encounter building system and a treasure system and workable, actionable advice with specific scenarios addressed throughout. But I don't use its rules for ambushes very often, and this is what they are. Here we have a situation where a standard party with the core 4 classes, Fighter, Cleric, Wizard, and Rogue, creep up against some guards. They're using these walls as cover to disguise their approach. Since this is exploration mode, they are all using the Avoid Notice exploration activity. At some point, combat breaks out here. Either the party launches an attack, or maybe one of the party members failed their stealth check. This is the GM Core section on how to deal with the situation, called Initiative with Hidden Enemies. Instead of having a surprise round, everyone rolls initiative and acts in round 1. Now everyone who is avoiding notice rolls stealth for initiative. Now what if you're untrained in stealth, like the Fighter and Cleric here? Their stealth scores are quite low compared to their usual initiative stat of perception. Well, the GM might allow them to roll perception for initiative instead. However, they forego the opportunity of being undetected at the start of combat. Undetected means the enemy does not know where you are. While rolling initiative, they get to add the cover bonus they get from their cover to their stealth roll. And in this case, I would say that every party member has greater cover, so gets +4 circumstance bonus, while the rogue here gets regular cover, a +2 circumstance bonus. Note that this is an open roll. Most stealth checks in Pathfinder 2e are secret rolls, but this roll for initiative is an open roll. All right, now they all roll initiative. They are all avoiding notice, all the party members, and they all roll stealth for initiative. When combat starts, who are these guards aware of in the party? And how aware are they? Well, before answering that, let's review some vocabularies, what I call the stealth conditions in Pathfinder. They are observed, hidden, and undetected. Observed means they can see you normally. Hidden means they don't quite see you, and they have a chance of missing you if they target you, but they know what square you're in on the map. Undetected means they don't even know what square you're in on the map. Additionally, some creatures who are undetected are also unnoticed, meaning that the enemies have no idea you're even in the vicinity. Of course, every enemy who is unnoticed is also undetected. Now let's go back to our example. The GM Core guidelines Have your initiative roll do double duty. It not only determines how early you act in combat, but also determines whether your enemies perceive you if you are stealthing. In our example, the Desert Guard won initiative and acts first, but who in the party does he detect? Well, we need to look at his perception DC. You add 10 to the perception modifier, so since his modifier is +7, his perception DC is 17. We then compare all of the stealth initiative rolls from the party members and see if they succeed against this DC. Those party members who succeed are undetected by anyone whose DC they meet or exceed. We see our rogue and wizard rolled well. They rolled a 23 and 22, so they are undetected. The guard does not detect the rogue or the wizard. However, our cleric and fighter rolled low, 13 and 10. So the guard detects where the cleric and fighter are. Now note that the GM core is silent on whether our fighter and cleric are hidden or observed. Let's imagine this wall was not quite so long and the fighter has line of sight on the Desert Guard. A GM can approach this two ways. The GM can say that they're all hidden, that the Desert Guard does not see them but knows where they are. Or the GM can refer to the degrees of success in the sneak action, where a regular failure gives away your location, makes you hidden, but a critical failure makes you observed to the enemy. This guard now can act and is aware of these two creatures. He can do his turn at this point, including doing seek actions, or he can delay his turn for later. Hopefully an enemy reveals itself and he can jump into initiative after that enemy's turn. Or he can ready an action. Maybe he takes out a bow and spends 2 actions to ready a bow strike when an enemy reveals itself. Now, this system from GM Core all looks workable. A little complicated, but workable. I can see what the designers were thinking here. They want to lessen the number of rolls you have to make. They want your initiative roll to do double duty. But in practice, I think it's not intuitive and it can lead to some weirdness. For example, what happened before we got to this point? I assume the GM asked all of the player characters to roll stealth checks to get into these positions in the first place. If they all succeeded, which I assume they did, if they are launching an ambush, I'm now asking them to make a second stealth check that has a chance of failure. Another way I could have run this was maybe the player saw the guards from a distance, describe what they do, and then we just jump to initiative, where the party is ambushing the guards. But that rules out some situations. It precludes other possibilities. Like maybe the party creeps up and is detected, and the guards don't fight right away. They demand that they reveal themselves and explain themselves. And this might be an opportunity for a parlay where the party tricks the guards or bribes them or whatever. Also, if we were to run this as written, it can lead to some weird situations. For example, the example that they actually talk about here where the guard wins initiative, but every party member succeeds against his perception DC, and he doesn't detect any of them. Here, every party member has a 17 or higher on their initiative roll. Well, here it says, well, all the enemies are undetected, but not unnoticed. The guard notices there are enemies in the area. That means a participant who rolled high, the guard in this case, still knows someone is around and can start moving about, seeking, and otherwise preparing to fight. And I'm asking myself, well, the party had crept up successfully to the guards up to this point, and they probably launched the attack against the guards. So why would there be a moment in the fiction for the guard to ruminate over what he should do? I think this is unsatisfactory and also not intuitive and not representing a reality in the fiction. Another more subtle issue in how this is presented is that it assumes everyone in the party's side is noticed by the guards, even though every party member had succeeded on their exploration activity that was called avoid notice. But we start with them being noticed. It rewrites history, and it starts with the guard knowing exactly, well, if you go rules as written, how many enemies there are arrayed against them, which is weird. Imagine you're a party walking through an urban area and 4 snipers behind various upper story windows decide to launch an ambush against you, and your party wins initiative. By rule, you notice that there are 4 snipers in the vicinity, but don't know where they are. Again, it doesn't make sense. And there's at least one ability in this game from the assassin archetype that requires an enemy be unnoticed by you. So rules as written, if you're an assassin who is one of those snipers in one of those windows, and you succeeded on whatever stealth checks were required of you, and you initiate combat by firing your weapon, you can still be noticed. It's all kind of weird and unintuitive. Now, I'm going to go over how I tend to run it, and I call it Ronald's Rules of Stealthing. Now, note that I use the word tend to run it. I sometimes use the GM core system, and I don't remember why I use it in those particular instances, admittedly. Now, this title is kind of pretentious. It's disappointingly straightforward, and maybe how many GMs are already running stealth. In a nutshell, you keep your stealth state going into the encounter, and I'm going to run through an example and explain what I do at every step. Note that this is not exactly a simple way to run it, and might be more complicated than some people may want to run their game. Don't feel like you're bound by this system. If you don't do everything, it's all right. It's a game. And I go over some ways to simplify running stealth at the end. I'm going to go over 2 ambush scenarios. The first one is a stealthy approach, the example we've just gone through. There should be a period of time when the party can get closer and do things unnoticed. If the players don't want to be noticed by the guards, they have to tell me so, and so I consider them all doing the avoid notice exploration activity. I have them do stealth checks and apply bonus from cover as appropriate, and I compare their stealth rolls to the perception DCs of these guards. Note, and I imagine this question will come up, that I don't require that they use the sneak action from encounter mode. I'm going to put that up on the screen. It requires that you travel half speed and that you end your half speed movement within concealment or behind cover. I don't require that because that assumes an encounter and assumes very aware enemies. But these are guards who have been standing here for hours, maybe days even, and are not going to be hyper aware every moment. So I'm going to allow these characters to approach from a distance of 30 feet, maybe even more. Perhaps they found a moment when these guards were distracted, were arguing, what have you, to time their forward approach. Avoid notice does not have the secret trait, so it's an open roll. However, if it's appropriate and I'm in the mood, I will ask players to roll secretly because you might have a clever guard who will disguise the fact that they're aware of approaching enemies and might call for aid in some secret way. If all the party members succeed on their stealth checks, they get to those positions. If one of them fails, or if at least one of them was not avoiding notice, then these guards will notice one or more of the party members. Here, the cleric and fighter have both been noticed. Perhaps they were heard, and here I like to apply the degrees of success from the sneak action. Where a regular failure makes you hidden, the guards know where the cleric and fighter are at. And a critical failure means that they are observed. And I say possibly observed with a question mark here because maybe they're behind total cover, like in this example. However, this does not necessarily take us out of exploration mode. We don't have to enter an encounter. Sometimes detecting your presence is completely unremarkable. Let's say we're in an urban environment, people are walking around behind wagons, behind building corners all the time. Or maybe you are sneaking around a fort where soldiers are walking around the hallways all the time. Also, not all potential enemies will necessarily attack you if they sense you are a potential danger. Another example is, let's say, a wolf who's taking shelter in a cave. It might hear or smell the party's approach, but it doesn't necessarily want to enter a life and death struggle with several party members. In fact, it might want to try to hide in response. Now, in our situation, the cleric and the fighter are immediately suspicious. However, the guard might not want to start combat yet and might instead demand they come out in the open and identify themselves. Now, admittedly, the way I presented this makes it sound quite hard for a party to approach some guards undetected. Everyone has to roll, and it's quite likely that some party members are not trained in stealth. It sounds hard because it is hard. If you're low level, you're kind of shit out of luck. The upside is that at least some of you will remain undetected if combat breaks out. However, once one member of your party can become expert in stealth, such as at 3rd level, rogues can do this at 2nd level, then that expert can lead the party and have everyone follow their example as their exploration activity. Even if they're untrained, they get to add their level to their stealth score. And additionally, they get to add a circumstance bonus to their check of +2, and this increases as your proficiency goes up to legendary. Note that this does not stack with your cover bonus to stealth because it's also a circumstance bonus. So this helps a lot, and this also means that party members who are untrained in stealth don't fall further and further behind as the party levels up and they normally are not able to add their level. Next, an essential feat if you want to run a stealthy party is the skill feat Quiet Allies. If you're that leader who is an expert in stealth, you take this feat, and if everyone follows the expert, follows you, the party collectively only needs to make a single stealth check, the lowest modifier in the group. And naturally, that person rolling can spend a hero point to re-roll if necessary. All right, back to our example. What happens next? Let's say our party have all succeeded on their stealth rolls. They launch an attack. Let's say the fighter decides to go out and charge that guard. Well, we now enter encounter mode and everyone rolls initiative. However, the way I run it, everyone in the party who had succeeded at avoiding notice before remains undetected and unnoticed, unless something changes that. And so rolling initiative now has the sole purpose of determining what order in which you all act. Also, I have a house rule. We're entering house rule territory here. I avoid the situation, the weird situation, where one of the guards might roll first in initiative. When a party launches an ambush like this, I ask who will be the instigator, who is going to act first. In this case, it's the fighter, and no matter how low he rolls in initiative, he will always get to be first. Similarly, in a social situation where the party is parlaying with the foe and starts a fight, whoever decides to start the fight is always going to be first, is the instigator. I think this is a good rule. It reflects what happened in the fiction, and it rewards daring and initiative by letting you be first. This also gives an advantage to an ambushing party who can decide to do a particularly effective party member's turn first and have that happen at the start. Now, what if our party had been noticed while approaching? Well, we just play it out. The guard yells, "Who goes there?" And this might lead to combat. The guards might attack, or the party might attack. Whoever instigates the fight gets to go first. The fighter might step out to parlay, in which case, if combat breaks out, he's observed. Or the party might take advantage of being hidden and start the fight when the guard calls out, and they all have their various states of stealth. The rogue and wizard are undetected and unnoticed, and the cleric and fighter are hidden. This isn't the only kind of ambush scenario. Let's say your group of goblins are lying in wait, hiding behind the cover of trees, setting up an ambush point to attack people who are investigating this bloody scene. We're still in exploration mode, and unless those approaching people have some special senses, I just say all the goblins succeed at hiding. They're, after all, not making any noise, they're just sitting still there. It's up to those arriving people to do the search exploration activity to have a chance of noticing and detecting you. If they detect the goblins, then I would say that those goblins become hidden to these people, and if there was a critical success in locating them, then some goblins might be observed. If they detect you, then the players and the GM play it out. So that's kind of how I run it. Now, not everyone will want to run this the way I do, with this many checks and this much granularity. Here's a few suggestions on how you can simplify stealth at your table. First, when a party is in exploration mode, you can simply just ask for one stealth check for the whole party, using the lowest stealth score of the group. This makes ambushes easier, and you're effectively giving the quiet allies effect to your party for free, which is fine. One of the lead designers himself says that making some skill feats default and known by all party members isn't going to break the game. Another way to simplify things is that if the party is noticed while approaching, then everyone becomes observed to the party. You don't delineate who's observed and who's still hidden. Now, I put observed in quotation marks because let's say your rogue is still behind complete and total cover. They're not going to be observed, obviously. They're only going to be hidden if you're going by this approach. Now, random question I see coming up a lot. What if there's no cover for the rogue to hide behind when approaching some monsters? Can they use the avoid notice activity? And my answer is always yes. It's always possible for a character to be concentrating on not making any noise, even if there's no physical cover to shield you. You just lose the possibility of starting undetected when combat breaks out or getting the cover bonus to your initiative. Another way to run things is that if one side is unnoticed, then that side can get a circumstance bonus to its initiative rolls when combat breaks out. This could be +2, +4. Some GMs might want to even give a +10. Whatever makes sense for the situation. All right, final thoughts. I don't have many. Just to say that you should season these rules and suggestions to your tastes. Some tables might want ambushes to have more impact. Maybe you can do that last suggestion and give a big circumstance bonus to the side that successfully springs an ambush. But just remember that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. This can also work in favor of the monsters as well. Also be mindful of the 3-action economy in Pathfinder 2e. There's a reason there's no surprise rounds in Pathfinder. It's quite powerful for one side, let's say they have 4 party members, to have 12 unanswered actions before the other side can do a single thing. The preference of the design is not to have that. It's to give distinct, measurable advantages, but not win buttons to the side who plans and sets up conditions for their success. So that's it. I hope this video was helpful. If you have other suggestions for videos, definitely let me know. In the meantime, support my Patreon so I can make more videos. Supporting it gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. And also join my Discord. There are thousands of us. I hang out there a lot. We talk Pathfinder 2e and other gaming. And you can also play Pathfinder by joining our drop-in, drop-out organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern. So that's it. I have been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. See you next time.